Hello, good afternoon. Okay. So today we're just rounding up ahead of the essay on Monday. The unannounced reading for today is Levine's Materialism and Qualia, the Explanatory Gap. For your guys' purposes, we've actually already covered many of the points in Levine's important article along the way already. But if it does sound interesting to you for writing the essay after the class, that's the thing to look at. It's in the Chalmers collection, Materialism and Qualia, the Explanatory Gap. And the addendum is good too. So, the essay is due on Monday. We are all agog. Any last questions about that? Okay. It's invigorating to see those keen, alert faces alive with the quest for truth. Okay. And the reading for Monday, we are really moving onto a different level after Monday. You know, when you're playing a game, you go up a level. We kind of go up a level on Monday. And we'll look at a paper by Jaspers called Meaningful Psychic Connections. This is quite a difficult paper. I think it's much the most difficult thing we've looked at so far. The good news is that although I'll send you that this afternoon, but although I'll send you the whole of his chapter, I'm only suggesting you read the first 4.5 pages. And with Jasper stuff, it's always much better to read just a couple of paragraphs and have them absolutely mastered than it is to read a whole bunch of it quickly. So take your time with it, and if you don't get through the first 4.5 pages, then that's okay. Just take the time to get through it paragraph by paragraph. Okay. Well, today we're going to review most of the main ideas we've been looking at and suggest some new ways of stating them. So we've been looking at this idea of imaginative understanding versus scientific explanation. And the whole puzzle of the mind and brain is to understand how those two types of understanding are related. So I'm going to start out by looking at what those two kinds of understanding are and how they might be connected, and then go into physicalism, which has played a big role in what we've done already, and suggest a new way of thinking about what physicalism is. Okay, so a natural way to think about it with imaginative understanding versus scientific explanation is that these are different spaces that the understanding might inhabit. So they're just two different genres of explanation. You can understand someone imaginatively. You can understand them by describing them in terms of the scientific laws that they fall under. And those are just different things. That's a natural reaction. But what does it mean, imaginative understanding? What are you doing when you put yourself in someone else's shoes? There are actually two quite different models. I think these are two quite different models you could have here for what's going on when you imagine being in someone else's place. One thing is that you're kind of picturing, you're getting qualitatively what it's like for the other person. The other picture is that you're using yourself as a model of the other person. Did we have this example of model airplanes, wind tunnels before? No? Okay. It doesn't matter if we did, everyone's forgotten it, so okay. Suppose you're trying to understand how an airplane is going to behave in wind. One thing you can do is use the actual airplane, just take it into a tornado or whatever and see what happens. That is kind of expensive. Another thing you can do is have a scientific theory of how your airplane is going to behave in turbulence, and that is a different thing. But it's also possible to just get a model, a scale model of your airplane, and put it in a wind tunnel and see what happens to the scale model, you take it that the scale model is going to behave pretty much the way the regular airplane is going to behave. You're going to take it that the scale model is functionally just like the big airplane. So if it manages fine in the wind tunnel, maybe the big airplane will manage fine in the wind tunnel. So you could think about what's going on with imagining another person's point of view as using yourself as a kind of scale model of the other person. I mean, we do have that kind of imaginative capacity. Suppose you're, suppose you take some friend of yours right now. Imagine your friend. Just take some arbitrary friend that you like to think about and think about them right now. And imagine they're sitting at home, working alone on a summer's afternoon, and then they hear footsteps in the basement. Okay, what do? Do they go down and confront the person? Do they call the police? Do they grab a baseball bat and head for the basement? What does your friend do? Put up your hand if you were able to answer that kind of question about your friend. Some of you, yeah. I mean, life would be pretty difficult if we couldn't predict other people in that way. So if you ask, how did you do that? How did you know what your friend would do? The natural answer is, this is only a guess, but the natural answer is you used yourself as a kind of scale model of the other person. You thought, suppose it was me sitting in that basement, sitting in that house, hearing footsteps in the basement. What would I do? If your friend's braver than you, you might factor that in to your simulation. If your friend's more timorous than you might factor that into the simulation. You see what I mean? So you take yourself as a kind of scale model of your friend, and you see what you do. You factor it a little bit, you weight it a little bit with factors like temperament, and then you see what's going to happen to them. So if you think of something like this as your functional organization, you've got a belief box, you've got a desire box, you've got your decision making, and then your action output. That's you, right? You've all got a functional structure kind of like that. Beliefs, desires, actions, reasoning. Okay, so usually what happens is the input to the system is like perception. What you see is you look around you. You think, am I going to get a coffee? What will I do next? You use that as your input to decide what to do. But if you could also take the system offline and put pretend inputs in, like pretend as your input that you're at home, pretend you got a perception of hearing footsteps in the basement, then just run your own functional architecture on that pretend input, and then you want to get a pretend output, grabbing the baseball bat or whatever it is. Yeah? So that's different to imagining the qualia the other person is going to have. That's different to imagining their conscious states. Simulation in this sense is just using your own box and arrow structure to model someone else's box and arrow structure. If you've got robots, if we have a whole bunch of robots roving around, and they're not conscious, but they have complex functional structures, you might actually want to give the robots the ability to simulate each other in that sense. Because it might be very handy for a robot to be able to predict what another robot will do. If you see what I mean. Yeah? So you could simulate in that sense without consciousness being involved at all. But maybe we do have something like this anyhow. Maybe we have that ability to simulate one another, and that's practically very useful just in predicting what other people are going to do. And if you're driving and you're thinking, well, what is this person doing in the car ahead of you? Then what you're trying to do a lot of the time is say, well, if that was me coming up to that crash ahead, I would be moving to the left right now. So you use that every day to predict what other people are doing. But there seems to be a different conception of putting yourself in the other person's shoes, that really does require consciousness, that really does require that you not just be a robot, that you really have a mind. Something like that is presumably what Nagel was thinking of. You're grasping how the other person's experiencing the world. You're trying to imagine the other person's conscious life from within. And in the case of the bat, your functional structure is pretty unlike the bat, so you're not going to be able really to use your own box and arrow structure to model a bat. But it's also likely to be true that your own conscious experiences are very different to the bat's, so that you can't imagine from the inside getting the bat's qualia, getting the bat's conscious life. Imagining the other person's qualia doesn't seem to be, on the face of it, it doesn't seem to be a matter of modeling their box and arrow structure at all. There seem to be two different ways you could think about imagination here, imagining someone else's life from the inside. And neither of them seem to have much to do with laws of causality. Is that right? Okay, any questions about that? We're going to spend a little while next week on this, but yeah. How it works, that's right. These are two pictures of what's going on when you imagine someone else's mental life from the inside. That's right. You factor in the ways they are different to you. Right. You could do it like that, but the question is, suppose you're just going to imagine what your friend does. You're not going to use yourself as a model for them. Yeah? Well, people are endlessly complicated. Right? People are all very different, very complex. So if you're going to imagine what your friend would do when they hear the footsteps in the basement, then how will you do it? You have to have an extensive knowledge of how your friend behaves. Yeah? And be able to draw on that. Now, if this is a good friend, then you might have that. You might have all that stored away. Yeah? But suppose it's just somebody who happens to live close by you, who you don't know at all. Yeah? Then how would you go about predicting what they'll do if they hear footsteps in the basement? Yeah, that's the idea. And that will be a very, what should I say, a very efficient way of reasoning. Because if people are pretty much alike, yeah, if we're all humans, we all have basic things in common, basic aspects of functional structure in common, then a lot of what we do will be the same. So it will be very effective to just use your box and arrow structure without having to, if you take this is obviously a very simple schematic model, right? Having that fully explicit, it would be like using an explicit theory of the aerodynamics of an airplane to predict how it's going to behave in wind. That's a real difficult thing to do. Yeah, it requires a lot of making stuff explicit, maybe getting it wrong, and then doing a lot of calculations that you also might get wrong. This way is much simpler. Just use yourself as a model and see what happens to you in that situation. Is that plain? Okay. Yes? Yeah, you know your friend your whole life. Yes. Yeah. Yes, right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not dead sure about that. On the one hand, of course I see what you mean, that we always have that sense of the depth and unknowability of other people. Yeah? And it's important to keep that in mind. But at the same time, if you come off the roller coaster and you're feeling kind of nauseous and groggy and a bit dizzy, yeah, and you look at your friend who is also kind of staggering a bit and not looking kind of out of sorts, you can look at each other and say, "Boy, I know what we need. Yeah, we need a drink." You see what I mean? You can look at someone and just think, "I know exactly what's going on there. Yeah, it's just like what's happening with me." So I think we have both these reactions the whole time to other people. That's part of the puzzle of the mind. That on the one hand, you take it for granted, you know what someone else is thinking, how they're feeling. And on the other hand, we always do this sense of the alien, the unfathomable, about how other people are. Yeah. I'm inclined to be optimistic myself and think we do know better. We tend to underestimate how well we can know other people. But I do see the pool on the other side. Okay? Yeah. Okay. So, how do laws and causality fit into this? I mean, often when you're trying to understand what's going on with a complex system, whether it's a human being or a gorilla or a shark or a robot or a corporation, what you're trying to do is get an understanding of how it works causally, what laws govern its behavior. That's what science does. Well, science is very interested in laws. If you're going to give a scientific explanation, you pour boiling water into a glass, and the glass cracks, and you say, "Why did the glass crack? How come the glass cracked?" Then what you want to do is find laws such that, what's the basic? Are there any chemists here or any chemistry majors? How come glasses crack when you pour boiling water in them? I'll tell you what I think. When you put boiling water, all the molecules are kind of rushing about at great speed, right? And when all the molecules are rushing about at great speed, then sooner or later they're going to find a weakness in the structure of the glass. And then because they're going to go so fast, they're going to push that crack wide apart. Right? That's the explanation, something like that. So without having the technical vocabulary to really make this rigorous, what you're getting there is laws governing the behavior of water molecules, laws governing the behavior of the glass. And you're saying what happened here was to be expected, given the laws and the kind of molecules that were in question. And when you say stuff like heat is motion of molecules, then what you're doing is you're saying how the laws governing heat are actually ultimately laws governing the motion of molecules. You're giving deeper explanations by giving a scientific account of what's going on. But how is it with getting an imaginative understanding of someone and knowing the laws under which they fall? That really seems different. With heat is motion of molecules. You could say, well, it's just a law. Whenever I pour boiling water into a glass, 9 times out of 10, the glass is going to crack. That's the way it works. And then you say, why is that? And then you understand it much better when you get the laws and you get the stuff about molecules. But if you take something like imagining someone hearing footsteps in the basement and seeing them pick up a baseball bat, if I can keep with that example, then do you get a better understanding of why they did that? When you say, well, look, the brain has got a whole bunch of molecules in it, and when those brain molecules in a particular area spin round and round very fast, the person always picks up a baseball bat. You can just predict that. Here we go. Do you understand what was going on any better when you get the laws governing the molecules in the brain? Or if you want to know why would you do that, why would you try to defend yourself? What you need to know is the reasoning. And it just seems an altogether different kind of explanation. And what is your hunch? Do you understand the phenomena here better when you shift to talking about the molecules in the brain and how they generate movement? Or is it have you just started talking about something else? Do you see what I'm asking? You don't see what I'm asking? Okay. Anyone else? Yep.
Would you count that psychological or physical? Would they fall into imaginative?
That's a great question. I was taking it that you're moving to a physical level here to find the laws, right? But are there psychological laws here? Are there any psychological laws like that? What would be an example of a psychological law?
Say, for instance, the person grabs his back, there's a particular trigger which sends it back to the memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if the character development led them to be scared of powerful or
Yeah.
something like that. So that meant he was more prone to grab the back.
He was more prone to grab the back. Yeah. I think just if you think about the way you had to formulate it there, if there was something suitable in your background that set you off, then you'd grab the bat. Yeah? But that's not really a law because you don't know what suitable means. Like physics is full of laws. Bodies attract each other directly as the square of their mass and inversely as the square of their distance. Right? So physics is full of real hard laws. You don't really get those laws in psychology. So one question is, are there any laws in psychology at all? And that actually goes back to that thing about the depth of other people. That, of course, there are millions of factors in anyone's background. You know, you or I both have endlessly many memories tucked away there. Which one is going to be active when you hear the footsteps in the basement? That's so hard to predict. Yeah, there are really going to be a law here. Yeah. The physical laws are... If a molecule moves at light speed, yeah. Is that right? Is it kind of like changing country? You move into a different jurisdiction? Okay, but yeah, okay, fair enough. The different things apply, yeah. Oh, so what we have in psychology are laws. Is that what you're saying? They're just special case laws. That's great. Okay, that really picks up in the last question too. Yeah, there are special case laws here. Okay, we're actually going to let's spend some time on that next week. Are these special case laws? First of all, let me just note it is very hard to formulate those laws. Yeah. We don't, I mean, if you try doing it, I did it just at the drop of a hat when I said that thing about the law of gravity. Yeah. You can't do that at the drop of a hat in psychology. Yeah. The other thing is, another interesting thing about this is, that doesn't give any role to the imagination. That doesn't give any role to imaginative understanding, getting inside someone else's head. But that seems so important in ordinary life. You know, if you want to know, you're meeting someone you haven't seen for a long time, you want to know how they are. What you want to do is get into their head. Yeah. But the final thing here is, suppose we say there are psychological laws, then how do they relate to the physical laws? Do they relate to the physical laws the way that heat is motion of molecules relates to the physical laws? I mean, is it that you deepen the laws governing heat and boiling water in glasses and all that when you move down a level? Now you understand much better why all the laws about heat hold. But when you move to the level of the brain from the level of psychological laws, are you understanding what's going on any better? What's your hunch? You don't have a hunch? Okay, we will actually spend some time in this next week. Let's move on to the question about physicalism. What is physicalism anyway? We've had three formulations of physicalism. One is that there's only one kind of stuff. There's physical stuff. Who rejects physicalism? I mean, which of the people we've looked at reject physicalism? Who? Descartes, yes. Is that what you would say? Yes, Descartes is the right answer. If you say there are two kinds of stuff, you're not a physicalist. Another view that we've looked at briefly but haven't talked about much is to say the only kinds of properties are physical properties. So that's not a view about what kinds of stuff there are. That's to say that pain is just C fiber firing, for example. And the last fanciest version of physicalism we looked at was Jackson's. The only correct information is physical information. You got all the correct you got all the correct physical information. You got all the correct information. Yeah. Here's a different way of thinking of it. Here are some new friends. These are possible worlds. Possible worlds. So there are lots of possible worlds. This is just a kind of sample. As you can see, one of the possible worlds is special. It's the actual world, the world that we live in. Yeah? But there are lots of different ways things could have been. And we talk about possible worlds, we're talking about what could have happened, what might have happened, what would happen. That's talking about different possible worlds. When you're experiencing regret or relief, then that's talking about a different possible worlds. Sometimes we talk about what's possible when we're saying what could be the case so far as we know. You can say, well, it's possible that this is true because nothing I know rules it out. You see what I mean? But when you're experiencing regret, that's a different kind of thing. And suppose you say to yourself, my God, this is a beautiful day. Had I only got on the bus, I could have been at the beach right now. Yeah, that's regret. Yes? If you say, I could have just have bunked off this class, I could be somewhere else. Yes? Hello? Am I the only one that has this thought? I need not have been here, you think. The agony. That's when I say that, it's possible that I could not have been here. I don't mean, for all I know, maybe I'm not in a lecture. That's the whole poignancy of it. The whole poignancy of it is that I'm absolutely certain that I'm in a lecture, but I might not have been. You see what I mean? So sometimes when I say, well, I might be in a lecture, or it might be a dream, right? There I'm talking about what's possible so far as what I know is concerned. But when I'm talking about regret, I'm talking about what could have been, even though the agony is, I know perfectly well that it didn't happen. So talking about possible worlds is talking about places where you might regret not having gone. Yeah? Relief is the same. If you think, by God, I nearly fell off that cliff, I'm relieved I didn't. Now what you're saying, there's a possible world in which I did fall off that cliff, but I know that's not the world in which I am. Okay. Well, one way to formulate physicalism is to say, suppose we've got two possible worlds, and they're the same in all physical respects. Then must they be the same in all mental respects? Suppose that off in another possible world, there's a lecture room just like this one, with people in it, just like you and me. And there's a double of you in this world, physically exactly like you. Is that, if it's a physical duplicate of you, must it have exactly the same mind as you? Yep. Physical duplicates that have different minds. Twins are can be physically very similar, yeah. But if they're actually duplicates, they'd have to be seeing exactly the same things at the same time, yeah. If they were like that their whole life, then you get the case I want, yeah. Would they have different minds? Really? So give me an example. These exact physical duplicates, molecule for molecule identical. Yep. There's absolutely no way to prove it ever. Right. Right. You couldn't prove that it is the exact same. Okay. Yep. Yeah. I'll come back to that. Yeah. 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 Very good. Right. Right. So when you say you can't prove it, it depends on what your starting assumptions are. If you are a dualist, if you think there's physical stuff and there's ectoplasm, then of course they could be completely different. Yeah, mentally. Because they might be physically the same, but the ectoplasm could be quite different. Yeah? Yeah, suppose you're a physicalist. They don't know what they're thinking. Why? Because nobody can ever know what anybody's thinking. Okay, in that case, you could not know. It might be that you don't know what either of them is thinking, yeah? But you could know that whatever they're thinking is the same. Well, how could it be different if there's no ectoplasm? Because it's physically the same. So the reason I hesitated about what you say is, if you have physicalism as an assumption, then sameness in every physical respect is going to be enough for sameness in every respect. Yep. It's a bit like nations and people. If you get two nations, nation A and nation B, and all the people in nation A are exact duplicates of the people in nation the other one, right? The A or B or whatever it was. Yeah? If all the people are doing exactly the same stuff in those two nations, then if one nation's at war, then the other nation's at war. If one nation's got inflation in the economy, the other nation's got inflation in the economy. Assuming that there's no more to nations than the people that compose them. Yeah? So there's no more to you and me than the atoms that compose us. If the atoms are all exactly the same, then everything must be exactly the same. That's what physicalism is. It's a view that there's no more going on than the atoms. Yeah? So a way to say what physicalism is to say, if two possible worlds are the same in all physical respects, then they're the same in all psychological respects. That's currently, something like that, is how most people working on this stuff would define physicalism. Yeah. Two people, yep. A property dualist. I agree with that claim.
Do you think there are these necessary psychophysical?
Yes, I think you could. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, I'm actually not sure. Okay. It really is difficult that. But if you're a dualist there about properties, you are a kind of dualist. Yeah. So that defines the sense in which you're not a physicalist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether that space is open. is not easy. I agree. We will come back. This is just an opening shot at the issues, if you see what I mean. We will come back to this. We will develop it much more. But you're right, I was skipping over that. Okay, so look at that. Now we've got a new definition of physicalism. Isn't that great? Oh, what do you want? Okay. So supervenience, that's supervenience when you have the thesis, there are two possible worlds are the same in all physical respects and they're the same in all psychological respects. And if supervenience is true, then if supervenience is true, then there can't be two kinds of stuff, physical and mental, right? Because if there were two kinds of stuff, what happened with the one stuff might be quite different to what happened with the other stuff. And notice that even if you have variable realizability, even if you have quite different kinds of things, physical kinds of things, feeling pain, supervenience could still be true. Right? So maybe you feel pain and you have C fibers. Maybe an octopus feels pain and it doesn't have C fibers. Still in all, if you fix your physical state, that has implications for what your mental state is. What your mental state is might not have implications for what your physical state is, but your physical state nails down what your mental state can be. Yeah? So that's physicalism. Once you've got a definition of physicalism like this, you can have many happy hours getting your own fine-tuned version of supervenience. But actually, I'm just going to... I'll maybe come back to that if there's a time. But let's go back to Jackson's Mary. Remember Mary, who's got a lot of scientific information and doesn't know anything about the colours. If Mary knows all about the physics of our surroundings, she knows all about light and the different wavelengths that things reflect, and she knows all about the physics of the human colour vision system, then does that leave open what the colours of the objects are and what colour experiences people are having? That's to say, could it be that Mary's knowledge of all the physics, there's one possible world in which all that physical stuff is true, and another possible world in which all the same physical stuff is true, but people are having different colour experiences in those two worlds? What about that? What's your hunch? I mean, Mary seems to think that. She knows all the physics, but she says, I have no idea what's going on in people's mental lives. If the physics really uniquely pins down what the mental life is, then why can't Mary figure out what the mental life must be? Yep. She can't what? She can't practice. Yeah, right. But my question is, why does she need to do that? Because after all, if her physical information pins down uniquely what psychological states there are going to be, why can't she know that? I mean, why can't she just read it off? Yep. I just mean knowing what the colour experiences are. Whatever she learns when she steps out of her room, that's what I mean by knowledge. Yeah, she learns something about what's been going on in people's heads all this time. Yeah, let me just leave you with that question. I partly mean to be rounding up on what we've done so far, but also raising things. And this actually connects to Antonia's question. If that's right, that Mary's information leaves open what's going to be happening with the qualia. And you could have two different possible worlds in which all the physical properties are the same, but all the qualia are different. Right? Did someone say no? Every physical what? Everything physical is the same, let's suppose, yeah. Yeah, but okay, that's fair enough. But what I mean is, suppose Mary knows all about your physics. Suppose that from her black and white room, Mary has actually kept tabs on individual people. She doesn't get the information in colour, but she just scans them, let's suppose. She scans you. She knows exactly, cell by cell, all about your physical composition. But she says, what the experiences are that you're having when you look at a rose, I don't know. My physical information leaves it wide open what experiences you might be having when you look at a rose. That's right. Yeah, that's right. If everything physical was the same with her as the people outside, then I agree, likely she'd be able to see the same colours. Yeah. I'm actually talking, though, about Mary's knowledge, whether her physical knowledge pins down what the colour experiences are of the people that she's thinking about, not her own colour experiences. Okay, we can talk about this more. But suppose you could have that. Suppose physicalism is false. So, yeah? Yeah, carry on. Yes. That's my next point. Right, you're ahead of me. Yeah? Yeah. Can you do that louder? Sorry. It seems different to variable realizability. Variable realizability says you could keep the qualia the same, yeah, but different physics. You get PZ here and you get PX here, yeah. But what we're talking about is whether, given that the physical is fixed, you could have different kinds of qualia coming off. Yep. So they seem to be running in different directions, these two questions about variable realizability and about physicalism. Yeah. Physicalism has to do with whether the level down here fixes what's going on up here. Variable realizability has to do with whether what's going on up here fixes what's going on down there. Does that make sense? Yeah. But that last question, I mean the question before, that really seems to me key. We've been contrasting the whole time imaginative understanding and scientific or causal explanation. So suppose that imaginative understanding just gets you onto the qualia, but that the qualia, that the physics could be the same, but the qualia quite different. Then if you could have two possible worlds with everything physical just the same and the qualia quite different, well, all the causal processes in those two worlds would be exactly the same. Everything would roll on. If you took all the qualia of the people in this room and swapped them all around, but left the physics just the same, then everybody would be moving and acting exactly as they had been before. Because if the physics is the same, everything causal is the same. So the qualia would have to be just a kind of decoration on the universe. Just a kind of ornamental water spout that nature has put on us. Why? We have no idea. Your conscious life couldn't be making any difference to what happens. Yep. That's right. Well, that's a very peaceable response, right? You didn't just grab your baseball bat, but okay. Very good. Yeah. Oh, you think you think that psychological difference would be making a difference to what you do? Yeah. Whether you feel anger or just a desire to tidy up. Yeah. Yeah, right. Okay, but the point is, if it's possible to have the physics the same, but the qualia different, and that's kind of what your example is suggesting, right? You might be cleaning up here, and you'd be swamped with anger, or you might be cleaning up with just a general fussy kind of attitude. The point is, it just doesn't matter in this picture what the qualia are. Your qualia could be anything. Your conscious life could be anything. Your conscious life makes no difference to what is going on. When you think about Nagel and the bat, when you know about the bat's physics, when you study the bat scientifically, you understand everything there is to understand about what's going to make the bat behave the way it does. Yeah? So if you're missing something when you can't imagine the bat's mental life, the bat's mental life can't be making any difference to what it does. Because you were already able to predict exactly what the bat's going to do from your knowledge of it physically. So imaginative understanding can't be telling us about the causes of things. We like to think that when you're reflecting consciously, what you consciously decide to do, will I go get a coffee? Will I go see Bill? Will I go see Sally? You think your conscious life makes a difference to what happens next. That seems so important. But if physicalism is true, physicalism is not true, if you go to the same physics with different qualia, then the qualia can't be making any difference to what happens. The qualia can't be causing things to happen. You think you're in charge, but you are not. What happens is that your body drives around, motored by its physical structure, governed by the physical laws. Your conscious life is rolling along kind of in the rear, observing what happens and saying, hey, I did that. I wanted that to happen. I'm going to make this happen. But it's not actually connected to anything. And on that bombshell, we'll pack up for today. Okay, thanks, guys.